So, but it still seems somewhat surprising to me that Percy couldn't sue Monsanto for contaminating his crops, whereas it sounds like in the United States that's not the case, that you've been able to successfully litigate against Monsanto and receive damages for what they've done.
Yeah, it's a great point and a difficult point. What happens is, and people, can check our site. We did a report which we've updated called Monsanto versus U.S. Farmers. And we have every case there where Monsanto, using Pinkerton agents, using its own secret police, have gone onto farmers' crops, tried to find their patented variety, and then have sued the farmers. People may have seen some of this in Food Inc. or in Deborah Coons Garcia's wonderful movie, The Future of Food. These farmers were featured, and there's an investigation ongoing by the Department of Justice and USDA into this. We'll see what they do. I'm not as hopeful as some that they'll do anything, knowing the power of Monsanto. But still, it's good that they investigated into this patenting and concentration. And the problem is, people out there, you got to remember, these farmers are, on a tiny margin anyway in this country, and suddenly you're sued by a multinational corporation. You don't even understand patent law. Mm-hmm. You don't have a patent lawyer, but you probably don't have a lawyer at all. And so, we found that a substantial percentage, I think it was around 40% of farmers, represented themselves in court. They represented themselves against Monsanto lawyers. We have a tough time against those lawyers. One of the lawyers we face is Dick Cheney's son-in-law, Phil Perry. These are high, these guys with major influence, and so they just destroy these farmers. They have no chance. So, we have set up an 1-800 helpline. We do what we can to bring resources to help these farmers. There's been some countersuits now, just as you suggest, on trespassing. There's a suit that Public Patent is doing out of New York and some farmers to try and challenge the validity of these patents. At least a small counteroffensive against this has been going on. I know there's Monsanto's pulled back a little bit because of the DOJ, Department of Justice investigation. So things are improving a little bit, but for a while there, it wasn't even David and Goliath. It was a simple massacre because they would just come in and they'd sue these farmers. And then, of course, there's tremendous fear because, farmers would report on each other in order to avoid, being targeted by Monsanto. Monsanto targeted seed savers in soy. They still have a lot of seed saving, saying if you're saving any of our seeds, we'll sue you, which they then did. So it created a kind of a shakedown in the agricultural, many of our farm communities. When I was a kid in New York City, the mafia used to come into a new restaurant and say, it'd be a shame if this restaurant were to, burn down. And how about forking over, $10,000 a month or $5,000 a month? And we'll just make sure it doesn't burn down. Well, that's what Monsanto does. It goes up to these farmers and says, you're probably contaminated. And, just to settle things in so you don't go to court against us because you have no shot if you do, how about this settlement? And they have gotten millions and millions and millions of dollars out of these farmers to do this. It really is nothing. I see it as nothing short of a mafia-style shakedown because farmers are terrified of being extortion. It's terrified of being contaminated, knowing if they are, that Monsanto is going to take them to court. They don't have hundreds of thousands to spend in court cases, for goodness sakes, and they have no idea of the patent law. So it really is. Thank goodness it's in Food Inc. And Percy's and other stories are told in some other movies, including, as I said, The Future of Food. But why in the heck has not? I think CBS Nightly News did a very short piece on this, but this should have been Frontline. This should have been a major. This should have been
60 minutes.
60 minutes. This is a shocking story, and I have to say, I am. And it's not like it's not known. We published our report. I've spoken on many, many shows around the country. Many of these farmers are extremely articulate, as people who saw Food Inc. saw, or Future Food, very articulate. And it's just, there's no reason on earth that this has not been, except for the power of these chemical companies, that this has not been out there. And make no mistake of it, by the way. People should remember that genetically engineered foods are, the major purveyors are Monsanto, Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF. These are chemical companies selling their chemicals. It's Monsanto selling its Roundup. It's Dow now trying to sell its 2,4-D. These are herbicide companies that have invented a way to sell a lot more of their chemicals. That in the end of the day, we will have super weeds that are resistant to all of these herbicides. That you can't kill them with Roundup, you can't kill them with 2,4-D, you can't kill them with dicamba. They're going to leave us with that legacy. They don't mind. because all the way up they're just going to be selling a hell of a lot more of the chemicals that they make. And to heck with the rest of us. It's as cynical as that, folks. It is just as cynical as that. I mean, this is a technology based in promoting herbicide use and herbicide sales to companies that make herbicides.
I couldn't agree more, and I don't think anyone listening to this call would disagree with the fact that these herbicides should be extremely limited and really not used in this way. But the behavior that you described from Monsanto seems to be fairly specific or attributable to them and not the other companies you mentioned, which is why I believe they are many people view them as the most evil company on the planet. I mean, that is just atrocious, reprehensible behavior to extort innocent farmers who are trying to make a living and really provide us with one of the most basic and important resources that we have to stay alive.
Well, that's right. I mean, listen, Monsanto's poster child for what a corporation shouldn't be. I mean, if you it really is. I mean, if you want to put the bad guy on the most wanted list, it would be Monsanto. And it's, by the way, this is not unique to its history. Monsanto also brought us Agent Orange, as people will recall, and PCBs, and people can look up Anniston, Alabama, to see where Monsanto literally destroyed the health of an entire town and fought like heck, having to pay for the cancers, diseases, and total disruption of that town's water system. I mean, they go around and they destroy things. That's what they do. Having said that, if you go through the history of Dow, for example, or even DuPont, it's not a heck of a lot better. What they have not done, and you're absolutely correct, is this particularly pernicious shakedown of farmers, extortion of farmers, is something that Monsanto went into full time. And, Monsanto really, in that sense, has a leg up on the bad guy status of these other companies. But let's not for a moment forget the history of Dow and DuPont, these chemical companies, and what they have done to communities, what they've done to public health over the years. It's not a pretty picture either. But certainly Monsanto right now is, I mean, 90% of the time, we're fighting Monsanto. And I don't, I have yet to understand the power of this company. It infiltrates our government. I mean, right now I could name you 5 or 6 people inside our government who are, pretty much Monsanto plants. That was true of the past administrations, the Clinton administration, you name it, all the way back. They just have a unique power, Monsanto. It's sort of like the
head of the
Rifle Association.
Vilsack is the head of the United States Department of Agriculture. I mean,
well, Vilsack, Tom Vilsack was the Biotechnology Industrial Organization's Governor of the Year in 2001. The law firm that Tom Vilsack worked in after he left his governorship and before he was named secretary is a law firm that has been opposing us on behalf of Monsanto and all of the other biotech companies on GMO foods in the courts. So he actually worked for the law firm. When I met with him a year ago, August, he did not have a general counsel. That is, he did not have a lawyer who, yet appointed to the agency. Well, last June, they did appoint a lawyer. He took her right out of DuPont. I mean, it's unbelievable. He took a major litigator right out of DuPont. And don't remember, DuPont owns Pioneer, which is in Iowa, which is his home state. He took this lawyer right out of DuPont and put her right into the general counsel of USDA. I mean, come on. And I mean, and Tom Daschle sadly is now working for DuPont and his on GMOs, and his daughter is his chief assistant to Vilsack. But we could go all the way down the line here and talk about folks. Beachy was until recently a former vice president of Monsanto, was the guy who was at USDA deciding who gets grants for sustainable farming. They took him right out of Monsanto. Our trade representative, you name it. I could go down the list and just give you. We call this the revolving door. You have all these Monsanto executives, and some from DuPont, and they revolve into the government. They make sure policy goes their way. And believe me, if you and I have a call 2 years from now, Vilsack will be back as a lobbyist or at one of these law firms, and all of these folks will have revolved back into these corporations, having done their work inside the government. And it's an absolute scandal. And certainly at the FDA, while these crops foods were being approved without labeling and without testing, I mean, they're unlabeled. They're untested, and we're eating them. And the reason that happened was essentially a corporate coup d'etat at FDA in the early 90s. And it's just through the revolving door. In this case, Michael Taylor, who was one of Monsanto's lead lawyers became assistant commissioner for food policy, and under his aegis, under his supervision, they approved these crops and BGH without labeling, without mandatory testing, without mandatory labeling, and that's how all this started. So this is this kind of revolving door that is really a challenge to our democracy. Particularly since every poll shows somewhere around 90+% of Americans want these foods labeled, and yet we don't label them, so we're not responding to the people, responding to the interests of a very, very few corporations.
Absolutely. So, you certainly provided us with loads of information to be discouraged because of the enormous resources they have and the penetration they've made into the market. But on the other hand, I think you've also provided lots of information for encouragement and to know that ultimately we will be successful. And I think that's really the good news, is that we can make a difference. We have made a difference, and organizations like yours have been phenomenally useful and important at catalyzing this process. So,
it is amazing how successful folks have been, and we certainly are proud to be part of that. And I think that, because they have misunderstood nature, and because people, I think, will begin to realize more and more that this offers them no benefit over the years and only risks. I mean, I think that this will be viewed as the greatest failure of modern agriculture. But, two things. One is these three companies, Monsanto, DuPont, and Syngenta, they currently own about 50% of the world's commercial seeds. So we want to make sure that we don't just defeat them in food, which we will. We will, all of us together. These foods are unsustainable, and we will defeat them.
What's your best guess for the timing? Not the range.
I think I would say the next 3 to 4 years we will see genetically engineered foods become a thing of the past in the United States, and of course they already are around the world. But when we defeat them here, because they have no future as far as the super weeds, as far as not providing us with any benefits, and I don't think they can resist labeling for that much longer. They just don't have anything there besides this herbicide tolerance. It's not a sustainable technology, So it's planned obsolescence, and it will catch up with them. And I think people will realize that more and more. This is absolutely true, folks. I had a Monsanto guy come up to me in a congressional hearing and say to me, within 10 years, he said within 10, this technology will not be used. It'll be genomics will be used to look at breeding, but there'll be no genetic engineering of crops because this weed situation will destroy American agriculture. This is a guy from there to testify on behalf of Monsanto.
Wow! So they know it. They know they have a timetable.
They just know they're gonna sell. It was 153 million pounds of this stuff last year alone. I told you, right? So they know if every year from now Dow can sell 150 or 200 millions of its 2,4-D, Monsanto can continue to send Roundup, and now it's dicamba. Yeah, 10 years it'll be useless, but they'll have sold a hell of a lot of chemicals between now and then. And it's our job to make sure that does not happen. It's our job to make sure that we defend all those who are saving seeds out there, that we defend these fantastic farmers who are fighting Monsanto. And, the battle is joined, and at least in the last few years, we've been winning. And I'm confident that we will stay that way. And remember, as my brother always reminds me, and all of us all of us doing the good work in all the different ways we're all doing it, we're not required to be successful. We're required to be faithful, though. We're required to live our lives and do our work in a way that's faithful to what we believe. If we do that, then don't worry, the success will come. If all of us together do that against often great and difficult odds. But I am convinced, and also be at peace if you're doing the right thing and you're trying to live your life as best you can, and as we all try, and in faithfulness to what you believe, then in this case, knowing that the natural way is the best way, knowing the organic way is the best way, and knowing that we have to be humane, and knowing that we have to be socially just, and we have to defend the local and the appropriate scale and the diversity, all the diversity amongst us. In this case, food, but in all other ways too. We defend those principles, we'll be fine. And and in this case, I really do.